Hi everyone, this is your host Latifa Swela. Welcome to Qodwa's podcast powered by the CFA Society Bahrain. At Qodwa, we believe in the philosophy of paying it forward. This is why we are recreating our conversations that we have with people we look up to. We would like to take this time to thank Ahli United Bank in continuously supporting us in our initiatives.
Khalid Saad is a fintech entrepreneur and advisor that is passionate about starting new ventures and supporting existing ones. Khalid has worked closely over the years with numerous startups and companies on their digital market entry and business development strategies. Khalid is a board member of Oqal, Bahrain Chapter, which is the largest and most active angel investing network in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and the region. He is also a board member of CoinMENA, a regulated crypto assets exchange. He's a member of the Finance, Insurance, and Tax Committee of the Bahrain Chamber. He was also the founding CEO of Bahrain FinTech Bay, which is the largest fintech platform in the MENA region. Previously, he was a business development manager for the Bahrain EDB, which is a dynamic public agency that is responsible for attracting inward investment into Bahrain, enhancing the investment climate, and driving economic development. He also works with existing financial players, financial associations, central banks, lawyers, and others to drive development in the sector and make it more conducive and attractive for the business. So, Khalid, our 20s are defined more like as the defining decade for us. So many of the most important events that happen during our 20s, like finding a new job or just graduated from college, or maybe getting married as well, or having your new kids. These are all defining moments in our lives that usually occur in these things. But there's a deception as well that says there's an irony going on, that our 20s, the decisions that we make isn't very major as well. So do you believe that our lives are decided by those 20s moments that I just mentioned ago, that we might not even realize that are happening at all?
I think the 20s is obviously a very important time. I think it's a time of self-discovery, and it's probably the first phase where, post, obviously, university, if we talk about it, where people become pretty independent. In a lot of cases, less dependent on their family, per se. When it comes to career, when it comes to financial welfare, I'm not saying that there's a definite hard line between where you separate the two. But I think from a maturity perspective, that is one big change. And for a lot of people, I think it's important to balance the transition from being students to actually starting your career. And I think there's a big change in there, but it's also part of the maturity. Now, obviously, the 20s for me, for a lot of people, was a time of self-discovery, getting to know yourself even more, taking those initial crucial steps to becoming independent as much as possible. And I think that also sets the foundation mentally also for what you want to achieve later on in life. It's not the end game. So it's not like if you don't take a decision in your 20s, then that's permanently going to affect you. I think now we live in a world where things are changing very rapidly. Before, you used to, take a step in a certain career path, and that usually is it. I'm going to be a banker, and that's it. You end up in a track for the next 20, 30, 40 years as a banker. But now the world has changed very rapidly, very fundamentally, that, it's not too late sometimes when you take a decision later on in life. Now, obviously, for some people, they take the decision to either get married, have kids. That obviously changes the equation a lot of the times. But I think the maturity, that mental, let's call it maturity, definitely develops significantly in the 20s. I, for example, have laid the foundation for what I believe has set me to go to the path that I took in the middle of the 20s or mid-20s. When I first started, I thought, I'd have a traditional sort of career. But then I started discovering what I call the entrepreneurial or more adventurous side of things. And that obviously teed me off later on, post-20s, to where I am. So I think it's a mixture of both. A lot of things happen in the 20s. We shouldn't underestimate how important and significant it is. from that perspective. And I think it's important to have the right mindset going into the 20s. It's a time, where we explore a lot of things, we learn a lot of things, but it's not the end game. And I think as long as we realize that, it will set us off very nicely for what is to come later on. So it's a bit of both, I think. It's a very important part of life, but it's also not the end game.
I want to touch up on a few things that you mentioned, because you're right when you said that after graduation, there's really no one path to take. You mentioned that after when you turn 25 and during your mid-20s, that's when you started experiencing your entrepreneurial mindset. But what's the right kind of mindset to have so that when we first step into the real world, aka which is graduating college?
An open mindset. And I think that's very important. There is, as you mentioned, no one right path. And I think when people tell you, oh, you should take this path because this is the right path, now I think that beckons a question. Is this the right path for this time and era? Is this the right path for me individually? What defines the right path? And obviously there are certain things you shouldn't do. So, obviously that, there are certain no-nos if you want. But I think going into it with a completely open mind that, life is a set of destinations, different stops. Think of it as a train from one station to the other. Honestly, at the outset, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And now that I look back at all the different stops, it's transferable skills. I've moved from one thing to the other. I've tried semi-government sector, a big four. I've tried an American investment/technology company. I've developed something from the ground up, FinTech Hub, jumped now independently. So there is no one right path. So I think the best mindset is to go with an open mind, and the only person that will develop you is yourself. Now, you'll have your support structure, but I think as long as, you've got that continuous education development process and mindset, that's probably the best way for you to move forward. Now that I look back, I think that has definitely been the right thing. No right path, in my opinion. And I think the world is, again, we talked about a very different place, that defining whatever that right path is doesn't really, I think, exist. I think it's an illusion. So that to me is, I think, also lessens the burden on people. If you kind of understand that everybody's going to have their own independent journey. We just need to keep a very open mind about what that journey looks like, and don't feel pressured to take a certain path over others. And I think the times have changed, and the world is a very different place. And I think this is probably my advice in terms of that.
I think also having self-awareness, a lot of self-awareness, adds as well to that, because if you don't know how you feel about something, or if you don't really reflect a lot on your decisions as well, or even the choices that you've made, I think it's not gonna help you serve you well in the future as well. But there's also a popular myth going on that the 30s are the new 20s. And I do agree to it at some extent, but doing something later is practically the same thing as not doing something at all right now, right? And there's a conception going on that if you do something later on and halt it, it means that in your 30s, you're probably considered more wiser. That's why they're halting these decisions, which is what I don't really agree on. So how can we make better decisions today and kill in our 20s rather than killing our 20s and wasting those years?
I think a lot of things could happen in the 30s, 40s, 50s, whatnot. I think obviously the circumstances do change, but time has irreplaceable value. And so for people, it's better to take action now, do certain things while you can. What happens, especially if you look at 2020, for example, what happens every other day brings something completely different. So what about, I'm going to delay this by a year, 2 years, 5 years, maybe 10 years. If you're in the early 20s, I'll do it in the 30s because I'm going to be wiser. I'm going to be financially more stable, etc. You should definitely act now. And I think part of that development process, part of that maturity and becoming wiser is going through very different experiences while you're in the 20s. I'm capable, for example, as an individual and a lot of others, of doing what they are doing now or taking some of the decisions because of all the lessons that were learned in the prior decade, 10, 15, or 20 years in the early 20s. And so for people, I think, act now. It's not, I want to do this, but I'm just going to wait for some time because you don't know what's going to happen. And the world changes very rapidly. What you think is going to make you successful or provide you with that safety net in 10 years might not be even relevant over the next 6 to 12 months, especially in a world that is rapidly changing because of technology. Society is changing. I think with the pandemic, obviously, you've seen how the world has turned upside down. Those that have been very comfortable or have been cruising in their careers or have had developed a certain skill set for a very long period of time are now feeling very uncomfortable. And you've got the young people who are coming up with these new groundbreaking, innovative concepts that are defying the, let's call it, prevalent logic of, I'm going to be wiser in certain time, I'm going to be more mature, and so I'll be able to develop that successful solution or find my bliss. And so I think acting now is absolutely important. I like the saying what says, successful people are covered in scars, and not physical scars, but mental scars, and it's all these scars that are developed throughout the journey, and a lot of it comes in the 20s actually. And I think that's the opportunity that should definitely not be wasted. So acting now is much better than acting at a certain point in the future.
I had a misconception before, like a couple of years ago. I'm not going to jump into something unless I'm 100% ready. But then I don't know what happened where my mindset suddenly shifted and I started thinking, okay, I need to make risks now, because if I don't take risks now while I don't have anything to lose, then what's going to happen years down the road when I'm more maybe courageous or I have more skills? What if I make the wrong decisions, for instance? I think it's going to take a bigger hit on me. So might as well just learn today and I can do better later on. I completely agree with you. And I hear some of the conversations that I hear with people that I talk to these days, some of my friends or that, but some of them tell me that during those years in our 20s, we're covered with situations where it feels very uncertain, the decisions that we make, or there's a lot of anxiety going on. And if you add that up with what we're experiencing right now, I think the effect just doubles or triples up on them. So I hear things saying, people telling me like, I feel like I'm swimming in the middle of the sea and I can't see any shore, so that I'm not really exactly sure which direction am I supposed to. Or if I'm swimming, I feel like I'm not even sure if I'm going to the right direction. Or I hear people saying, I'm just hoping one day where I would wake up and then I'd get that snap that okay, I know what to do next. So how can we be more compassionate to ourselves and just understand that this is all just part of the process?
I think that's a very normal feeling, actually, if you think about it. Not knowing where you're headed, what you're supposed to do, whether you're doing the right thing, whether you're in the right place, whether you're spending your time wisely. This is absolutely natural. The number of times I've personally been in that situation is numerous. I don't even remember how many times. And till this day, at some times, it's normal not knowing. I think, as they say, the only certainty is uncertainty. But I think we should use that to our advantage. Not knowing where I'm headed at a certain point or knowing what I want to do has fueled my curiosity. And I think fueling the curiosity is a very important thing that we should experience, because it's allowed me to then take a step back and say, all right, I'm in the daily grind, moving through the days, day in, day out. Take a step back, reflect on, okay, what have I achieved? What do I really want to do? What do I really want to achieve? How can I then develop myself in whatever current capacity or role that I'm doing? What do I really want to do in the future? And start identifying those areas that I'm passionate about or have interest in. So I think it's absolutely normal. And I think if you look at today, it's very interconnected. People read a lot of things, have a lot of access to data. They see different imagery and a lot of things. So I think, that also adds to probably the complexity or the uncertainty and the anxiety of seeing what looks good, but then realizing, okay, maybe I'm not there. I have no idea what I'm doing. Am I a failure? I've heard it a lot from a lot of friends. I don't think I'm successful. I don't feel fulfilled or I'm satisfied. It's very normal. And I think a lot of these things, it's relative how you really want to define success or satisfaction. And so I think my message is, if you're feeling lost, if you don't know what you're doing in life, this is very normal. Everybody's been through these phases. If you read the stories of the most successful people, they've had phases where they've absolutely were lost or clueless, and did very unconventional things. But I think this is also an opportunity to take it to fuel your curiosity. And I think from this exercise or just this motion, you will learn a lot of things about you, about what you want to do, about the things that you want to change, I think, in life. And so very normal is a message, and you're not alone.
That's very powerful and optimistic. But about taking risks, you mentioned that we should encourage taking risks, especially during our 20s. And there are people still who would stick to their jobs simply because it's their safety nets or they're in their comfort zone. And I understand on some aspect because it gets quite comfortable, to be honest. Do you encourage exploring options early in our careers? And how do we make sense in navigating our interests and passions?
I think in hindsight now, it's very important. And I go back to the point that the world has changed significantly. And I think we're in a very different world than, let's say, our parents' generation, even when I probably started earlier. The rapid change or the pace of change, the pace of technological development has disrupted industries, and I think permanently. So it's very important to be flexible, to be nimble, and people should be encouraged to explore, whether it's exploring new routes within their current role, current organization, or looking at even cross industries and cross opportunities. That I think is very healthy. I know people fear change. Change, obviously, and I always say it's like flying into the clouds and you have no idea what's on the other side of the clouds. And I think that makes a lot of people very uncomfortable. A lot of people thrive on it, but a lot of people shun away from it also. I'm not suggesting that you should be jumping from one opportunity to the other within a few months or etc. That's probably not healthy, and that might give the wrong impression. But I think it's very important in a world that is changing, where you don't stay stagnant. A lot of people are very comfortable. There's no problem with that if that's what makes a lot of people happy. I think a lot of people have commitments that they don't want to take the plunge, as they call it, or risk in doing certain things. But I think when you're very young, less commitment, that is a very good time to start experimenting and exploring. And we're going into a world that is, obviously facing a pandemic, and as a result, economic times are pretty tough. So your traditional industries, or the engines of growth, Your traditional industries aren't going to be churning out or creating jobs as much as they used to. And these are what we call probably the traditional jobs. Now is the time for unleashing that creativity, that opportunity. If you look back at probably our grandfather's generation and maybe to our earlier parents' generation, you had to explore, you had to take the risk. There was a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, whether within existing organizations or just building something up, because the times dictated that you had to take risks, you had to take that opportunity. And obviously people got pretty comfortable with the economic development, revenue streams, whether from the private sector or the public sector, were more certain and guaranteed. Now I think we're at that critical juncture where we kind of need to rediscover that earlier spirit of exploration. And I'm pretty encouraged to see that a lot of people are taking very unconventional routes. There's nothing wrong with the conventional route, but I think we would need that much more moving forward, especially as we want to develop more of a digital and innovation-driven society. You can't do that using traditional means. You need to start exploring. And the 20s, when there are less commitments, are a perfect stage for doing that. So planting the seed early on is important. Doesn't mean you need to reach your final destination from the beginning. Nobody really does. And whatever the final destination that you think you have in mind is definitely not that final destination. You're going to be taking a very different route than you expect.
Yeah, there's always something new coming up.
Absolutely.
Always. But what I love about today's youth actually is that we're so much bursting with energy now. So much that there might be an imbalance between healthy relationships and hobbies and such. So how can we maintain that kind of balance?
That is very important. I've learned the hard way of spending years working relentlessly, whether part of it in my 20s, and obviously when you're younger, you have less commitments, you can go on longer streaks of what I call relentless or unforgiving work schedule. I've tried that also in my 30s, the last few years where it's been very relentless also. And what people might want to call a work-life balance didn't quite exist for me. So I think that is extremely, extremely important, As they say, health is wealth. So, you gotta obviously take care of your health. You gotta keep some time for you as an individual, whether it's spend time with the family, spend time with the friends, exercise, do things, take care of yourself, and do things outside of work or whatever you're pursuing. And it's usually, people think that you just got to go at it for a very long time, you're going to be much more productive. It's usually when you find that balance or dedicate some time, let me say, it's important to say, you know what, here's a hard stop. I'm going to stop doing what I'm doing and dedicate some time to do friends, family, hobbies, exercise, anything but work. Obviously, it doesn't always work, especially, maybe if you're an entrepreneur, you have a deadline, etc. But as much as possible, I think that's a very healthy habit. I wish I did it more, I have to admit, before. I'm trying to catch up on that for sure, especially this year. And it's brought numerous benefits because your best ideas usually come from that time, when you're sitting with friends, when you're running. Usually for me, running is when I start getting some really good ideas, or, reading anything. And you end up being much more productive. That avoids burnout. So I think finding that balance. Sometimes also what I do, which is useful, is let's assume you have a very long work day. And it's going to be a very long, hard working day. Taking 10 to 15 minute breathers where you either stretch. I'm going to read something that has nothing to do with the work I'm doing. Break that routine. 10, 15 minutes. It makes a massive difference for me. And that's usually when I take a step back and unwind, as they say. And, the inspiration, the ideas Health-wise, it's also, I think, very important. So I think there's no one right or wrong answer to how you can get that balance, but I think it's important that you do certain little things that will change your habits, because you can easily fall into the trap of working for 16, 17-hour days, and a burnout will definitely be around the corner after some time. So health is wealth. I know that very well now.
Yeah, I try my best to, because I know that my schedule is always packed, and if I'm not doing anything, I'm probably just brainstorming on what to do next. So one of the ways that I found really productive for me is to start my day an hour before or two before going to work, and I keep it completely for myself. That's where most of the burst of ideas come there, because I'm really sitting with myself and no one's awake at that time, so I have all the time for myself. And I really believe that starting your day with yourself, I think that's going to present your best image to the rest of the world. So that's one of the things that I usually do, and completely agree with you.
Just to add to a point, I share exactly the same thing. I'm a very early morning person, and especially when I had much less commitments in life, I used to get up at 4:30, 5, workout, eat breakfast, and I was always in the office at 6, sometimes before 6. And obviously, at times I had to open the lights in the office because absolutely nobody was there. And by 9 o'clock, I would have got all of the work done, pretty much. Had time to myself, had time to read, reflect, and that sets you up for the rest of the day. You don't have to wake up at 4:30 or 5 to do it, but I think having that individual time of reflection is extremely important.
Definitely. By 9 a.m., people are still probably trying to stay awake and
Yes.
have their coffee. But they say that there's a saying that says comparison is the thief of joy, and especially with the era of social media now, that's the effect is completely doubled up, and we compare ourselves a lot to other people, and there are so many with very low self-esteem, since you're busy comparing yourself to other people's lives and what others are doing as well. So it's inevitable that we're setting ourselves here to a trap. And unfortunately, many fall for it. And it's an ongoing concern now for years down the road. So how do we stop the habit of self-comparison and learn on just how to focus on watering our grass instead of focusing on other people's instead?
It is definitely a huge trap. And I agree with you in the world of social media, the internet, accessibility to endless data. With social media, the whole imagery, certain key messaging that is popping out in our faces day in, day out, things that look absolutely perfect. It's not, I think, helping the situation, and it's also fueling this comparison phenomena even more. The grass is definitely not always greener on the other side, and I think people always have that impression or idea that the grass is greener on the other side, up until they start experiencing the other reality that they were always aspiring to, or thought that was perfect or much better than the reality that they're living in, and start to realize that this is a flawed idea. One quote that I read once and never forgot and never will is, "Don't wish things were better, wish you were better." And I think it all starts with oneself. And looking at others or looking at somebody's life or certain images and wishing that we want them. The question is, what do people really want? And what defines your own happiness, fulfillment, whether it's own success? And I think these are all relative definitions. I need X, Y, Z to be happy. Is that true? A lot of people, when they actually attain those things, they're still not happy, they're still not fulfilled, something is missing. I think the other thing also is everybody has their own different circumstances. Different time, different place, different set of circumstances. What makes certain people happy or fulfilled is definitely not what's going to make you happy or fulfilled. I like to also, always sometimes compare this to finished products or an image. People look at a certain company or a brand and they see something that is amazing and they say, we need that. But if you really go and start to understand or dig into the journey and the history of how somebody or a group of people have arrived at that finished product or company, it's been a real struggle. And so I think it's usually, for a lot of people, it's not the destination that's going to keep you fulfilled or make you happy, it's the journey. And so, people might want to aspire to a certain thing or an image, but I think people don't really understand what is going to make them fundamentally happy. And that starts again with the individual. You got to develop yourself. It starts with you. It always starts with you, whether that's your happiness, whether that's your development, etc. Family, friends, society, others will definitely contribute to this formula, but it always starts with you. And again, that also goes back to the point of the only person responsible for your development is you. Social media definitely has its huge advantages, but it also has its massive disadvantages, and it's also fueling this phenomenon of self-comparison. So I think it's definitely a big trap. But start with yourself, and I like the exercise of taking a piece of paper, starting to jot down some ideas of I like doing this. This doesn't make sense. I want to focus on this. I want to focus on that, etc. And it starts to get you into the motion of better understanding yourself.
I completely agree. They say that you're the average of the 5 people that you spend most of your time with. So how important is friendships to you?
I think it's significantly important. It's very, very important. Obviously, sometimes, and you have a set of friends and it evolves over a period of time, but there are certain individuals that will always be there throughout the different ages. But I think having the right set of friends is extremely important. The support system that they bring throughout is important. The sounding board, bouncing different ideas, the energy that they bring. And you want to surround yourself with people that will provide you with a positive energy, will give you that reality check, that camaraderie. So I think it's very important. Friends play a significant role, especially when you're looking for that balance also in life, that we talked about, where I need to take time out. Let me spend some time with the people I really care about, and that includes those people. So you look back and there are certain individuals that have always been there, and you know that you can always rely on them, phone them up, message them up, and they'll always be there for you. So I think they do play a significant role. And some of my friends have had a huge impact on my life and some of the decisions that I've taken, positive decisions, let me say, which is important. So you could say that, you could be the sum of 5 very close friends or maybe a few more, depending on how big your social circle is or intimate social circle is. So I think it's very, very important.
What's your advice to people in their 20s about things they shouldn't do?
I think, from what I've seen and talking to a lot of people, don't quit too quickly. Life has a lot of tough stops, whether it's work, whether it's personal life. It's not always rosy, and it's never a straight road. If we talk about, for example, work or career, there are many setbacks, but it's how you react to these setbacks that will set you up in the future. I've seen a lot of people opt to say, you know what, I'm just going to quit, sit back, sit at home, and I want to get away from all of it because this is not working. There are a lot of moments in life that are, you'll feel that way. And if you'll end up quitting all of these times, one, you're not going to develop yourself. I think you're going to do yourself injustice. And so it's important. And there are no shortcuts to success. There are a lot of people now that want to, get rich quick, want to reach a certain destination very quickly, and it's not bad at all if you actually get there. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but I'm just saying that, again, you shouldn't fall into that mindset or trap. And so that's one thing. Use your time wisely. I think it's important to explore. It's important to not waste your time. Do not waste time. And I think it's important, like you said, again, don't say I'm going to do this in 5-10 years. Start now. It's very, very important, because the time that passes by, you will never get it back. And so that's very important. I think if I look back probably at certain points, I wish I did certain things differently. I strongly believe that whatever journey you take develops you into the person that you are. But I think there are certain things that I could have probably done earlier, or maybe certain things that I had in mind that I should have started on earlier and didn't keep till probably at a later stage. So I think that's these two are probably, in terms of the don't do's, are the ones that could focus on. You're gonna end up making a lot of mistakes. It's part of life, and it's just how you pick up from there, soldiering on, developing yourself, that are important for you. That's from the don't do certain things. And I look back at many times when I could have easily pulled the trigger and quit, but I'm very glad that I used that as a reflection point to think about what I want to do, what is the current situation, how will I react to it, and how can I move on more positively, focusing also on myself. And so I think in an ever-changing world, things will change very rapidly. And a lot of the times you have a path in mind or a vision in mind, but something will derail you. And it always happens at times when you're either comfortable or you're cruising or unexpected. But don't quit too easily, which is important. And take action now. Use your time valuably, because the time that goes by, you'll never get it back. These are the two things that I say, probably the don'ts, do that,
That's very valuable advice. Thank you so much, Khalid, for joining us today. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
If you like this episode, please don't forget to subscribe and share this with your friends. We'll see you guys soon.